Welcome to the show, sports fans. This is the Treasure Valley Prepcast on IdahoSports.com.
That's right. Welcome in another edition of the Treasure Valley Prepcast on IdahoSports.com, your one-stop shop for everything District 3 week in, week out here in the state of Idaho. My name is Brandon Baney. We are joined by Logan Green, our Treasure Valley expert. What's up, LG?
Oh, not much, Brandon. Just living life. Well, no one's sick in my family, so it's a great time to be alive.
Clean bill of health.
Yeah,
that's all we can ask for. Okay, so fans that are watching this, you can watch this podcast every week on the IdahoSports.com YouTube channel or Facebook page. I will note we're having some slight difficulties with our Facebook page currently in terms of me posting the videos. So if you want to see what we're up to, go check out that YouTube channel. And honestly, while you're there, can you hit the subscribe button? It's that little bell icon. That's going to help us out a ton. I've set a goal for the new year, right? You get into the year 2023, the new year, everybody sets their goals and resolutions in your personal life. And honestly, in your professional life, you should set some goals for the upcoming year as well, Logan. I have made it my goal to get the IdahoSports.com YouTube channel to 1,000 subscribers. We're like at 670-ish. So we're like 2/3 of the way there. But I'm hoping everybody can help us cross that finish line and help get our YouTube channel over the top. So if you want to watch the video of this until we get this Facebook problem solved, you're going to have to do it at YouTube. And while you're there, please hit that subscribe button. That's going to help us out tremendously.
Yeah, it doesn't cost you a thing. And if you're looking for a way to support Idaho sports, but not monetarily, just it's a click. So that'd be great, guys. Thanks.
Definitely. The audio version of this podcast, of course, available at IdahoSports.com on the homepage. Across the top, you'll see a little tab that says Prepcasts. And there's a little drop-down menu. You click on Treasure Valley Prepcast, and you can listen to the podcast there. You can also subscribe and download this podcast wherever you download your podcasts. Apple, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, etc. So you can subscribe and download there as well. If you are watching / listening, and obviously you are because you're hearing what I have to say, you'll notice I sound a little different this week. Usually I've got this really slick podcast mic that I talk into, but it's not working. So this is just a prop today, Logan.
Was mine like broke? I guess that's what I get for buying a $20 one on Amazon. So. Hopefully the earbuds work okay at least.
Yes. So yes, the IdahoSports.com pledge drive for new equipment starts now.
Cue the sad music right on the infomercial.
That's right. Operators are standing by. This is where we bring in all the celebrities for the telethon, and like Wayne DeZuback is in the back answering.
Hey, that would be kind of fun, actually. I would attend that, taking phone calls in the back with all the Idaho sports people. That would be fun.
Yeah, that'd be a good time
to answer all one phone call. That's probably an angry phone call that
Yeah. Oh boy. Well, speaking of things that make people angry, Logan, we'll get into it. We started this new feature, the IdahoSports.com daily top 25 rankings for girls and boys basketball. We talked about it a little bit last week. People didn't like it. So we initially were ranking the basketball teams 1 through 25 based on their IdahoSports.com power ranking number. But what I failed to discover when I started this endeavor is that our power rankings algorithm is kind of skewed towards the smaller schools, your 2As and 1As, simply because there tend to be more lopsided results because you'll have a school that's got 6 players going up against a Melba, for example. And so the disparity is greater, whereas 4A, 5A, 3A, generally the numbers are a little more even. So we kind of revamped it this week. We basically now it's still the top 25. Here are the 25 best teams according to our power rankings. But instead of ranking them 1 through 25, it's basically, okay, here are the 5A schools and how they're ranked. Here's the 4A schools and how they're ranked. And so I think it's a lot better. Everybody keeps complaining, that especially on the boys' side, how come Hawaii isn't ranked? And it's like, well, first of all, they still haven't played very many games. Second of all, they took some losses to some really good out-of-state teams. As they play more games, they will accumulate more points.
Right. I mean, if you look at their schedule right now, they sit at 6-4. And I mean, you're right. It's a computer that makes that ranking. So the computer doesn't have emotions and the foresight to say, yes, Hawaii will be a great team and probably playing in the state tournament. It can't look at that and say, we can all see that. But people always say this with college football, right? That there shouldn't be rankings until a certain period of time because you don't know anything and all that. But this is a computer, and you know what? Hawaii, they'll get there, right? And I've seen other people say that too. I've seen people up north say something about Lake City not being in there. Just wait, it'll come.
Right.
It always gives me a good chuckle. So
definitely. So I bring up the power rankings because in girls basketball, far and away, the team with the best power ranking is Melba. Not only for 2A, but for the entire state of Idaho. And they just continue to add to that. The big matchup last night, we're recording this on Wednesday, January 11th. The big matchup was Tuesday the 10th. It was Coal Valley Christian and Melba in the rematch. And Melba wins again by a final score of it was a margin of 13 points. They ended up winning by a final score of
46-33.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So Melba improves to 17-0 on the season. They're now 7-0 in Western Idaho Conference play. They've got a 2-game lead basically now on Coal Valley Christian as they swept the season series. Hallie Arnold, 16 points. Kendall Clark added 12 for Melba. The question that I posed on today's post on the website, IdahoSports.com, you can check out the homepage right now. It's right there for our Wednesday top 25 daily rankings for girls basketball. The question I posed is, can anybody catch Melba? Coal Valley is trying, and they definitely improved. The first time they played, Coal Valley lost by 24. This time they only lost by 13. And Coal Valley is definitely getting better as the season goes along. But is it going to be enough to overcome Melba, this juggernaut at the top?
And I don't think that the answer is – I don't think so. I don't think anybody can. And you know what? I saw some of the arguments out there where people were saying, you know what, there's no way that this team would ever beat this team, that this little team would beat this big team. I don't know if you can say that about Melba. I mean, they have beaten 5A SIC teams that are good. They beat Middleton and they beat Mountain View, just to name two of them, right? And those are two teams that I've got some stuff on them later to talk about, but those teams could very well be at the state tournament at the 5A. Are they the best teams? No. Clearly, Boise, Timberline, are an upper echelon. And I don't know if Melba is in that category. But, man, you throw them in the 5A SIC, and I don't think they have a losing record. I don't think so. And, I think that they will continue to stay that top dog. Is anybody going to stop them running up to the state tournament? And I don't think so.
Yeah, I'm more optimistic, I guess, because I see Coal Valley Christian. I see, Matt Beglinger is one of the best coaches around. They've definitely gotten better as the season goes along. And the only reason I guess I'm optimistic is because we saw this happen last year, except the roles were reversed, where Coal Valley beat Melba in both of the regular season matchups, but you could tell Melba was getting better and better. And then when we got to districts in the district championship game, Melba actually won, right? Melba toppled Coal Valley. Now, of course, the Chargers got the ultimate last lap. They took out Melba in last year's semifinals, gets to the championship, beat Aberdeen, so they're the reigning champs. So, history just from last year tells us that gap can be made up. So I guess I'm more optimistic. I still would lean Melba, but I think Coal Valley could do it.
And I guess I shouldn't be so quick to jump the gun to bury the defending state champs, right? So I guess, they are the defending state champs right now. The crown is theirs until somebody takes it, and I still think Melba has the best chance to take it. But right now, you look at those two, and you just think. I know a lot of times we've seen it in football where the conference here 2A gets to state and then just can't get it done, right? Can't get a win at state. These Eastern Idaho teams, even though they might be 500, the Aberdeens, Bear Lakes, West Sides. They somehow still win that game against our teams over here, but I don't think that's the case with girls basketball. I think that we might have the best two teams in Melba and Coal Valley over here. And I mean, that's what the power rankings show. I think it is correct in that regard.
Yes. Melba and Coal Valley played 4 times last year. We could definitely see that again this year. Don't be surprised if they end up meeting 4 times in districts and at state as well. So 2A basketball on the girls' side continues to be Melba. Let's move to the 3A ranks, Logan, where Weiser stood out to you over the past week.
Yeah, and this is one thing we talked a lot about Parma girls basketball last week, right? And rightfully so. I mean, they're on top of the league. They're fantastic, looking great. Really, look at this for Parma. They only have 1 game. They have 2 games where they have won by less than 10 points. One of those was against Weiser, and then another one was against Ryrie over at one of the tournaments over there. Now, of course, they did lose 2 games in there, so I'm talking about wins, right? And those 2 losses were against 2, right? Melba and Coal Valley, ironically. But they are just rolling through. So that's Parma. We talked about them last week. But Weiser on the girls' side, they had the 1 loss to Parma, and that was all the way back on December 15th. They've won 6 in a row by more than 10 points, and only one of their losses or one of their wins was by less than 10, and that was by 8 against American Falls, where they beat American Falls by 8. Other than that, they have been beating everybody by double digits. And so I look at Weiser and say, okay, well, let's hold on. We jumped and said this, we talked so much about Parma. But then this last week, they beat Payette, and they only gave up 8 points to Payette in that game. So that's the second game where they've allowed less than 10 points in a game. They beat McCall Donnelly, and they beat Homedale. So I just think right now the Weiser girls are rolling. And this is a team last year that rolled at the right time, right? They got that half seed from the district, and everybody kind of wrote them off because they had to play Timberlake and think, oh, that league up there is so strong. And I feel bad because I know I was talking to one of our great sponsors of Weiser broadcasts, and it was Council had made it into the tournament already, and I had talked to them and said, if Weiser makes it, would you like to support Weiser as you usually do? And she said, when Weiser makes it. And I kind of was like, all right, we'll see how that goes. And they did. And I called her back, and I ate my crow and said, yeah, I was wrong. Weiser proved us wrong. And you know what? They look better this year, right? Starting off with this incredible run that they're on right now. And so just needed to give some props to the Weiser girls for the way they started their season.
Yeah, they are so good. And when you look at the power rankings, the gap has shrunk between Parma and Weiser in our IdahoSports.com power rankings to where they're now basically within a point of each other. So,
and they're 1 and 2, not just in the league, but in the state. It's Parma and it's Weiser. And so right now, girls basketball is, you look around the state and there's some, maybe our 1A teams are not at the power rankings, but 5A, 4A, Bishop Kelly being there, 3A, 2A, there are some very strong teams, and there could be potentially, right, a couple of All Treasure Valley matchups if it all goes according to plan, right, in semifinals or state championships come February, I guess I should say.
Really impressive with Weiser. Toby Neuer, such a fun player to watch. She is so amazing with the ball in her hands, whether she's shooting it or setting somebody else up. She's slick out there. So, yeah, good job, Weiser. Let's swing down to the 1As, where another school that's caught your eye, and it's caught our eye a couple of times this year, but we haven't really done the deep dive on them yet. And that's Greenleaf Friends.
Yeah, and they had a Rimrock sits atop of the league right now, right?
Right.
But the loss that they have, that Greenleaf has, is to Rimrock, right? And it was a close game, a couple of points. They were right there in that one. And they do have a win against Notice, who, of course, went to state last year for the girls. And so I think Greenleaf has been quietly floating behind or under the radar. And they might have 2 of the best players that you've never heard about, right? I think Hope Miller some of her stat lines over the last couple of games. She dropped 15 points against Garden Valley, 19 against Idaho City, 18 against Victory Charter, and 21 against Notice to go along with 8 rebounds against a team from state a year ago. So Hope Miller's been tearing it up for the Grizzlies. Also, her teammate Shay Olson, Shay dropped 31 points against Cascade. 31 points. That is a heck of an effort. That will get you a player of the game, no matter what level of basketball you're playing, if you drop 31. And then 23 against Rimrock, against the team, right, that is sitting at the top of the league, is when Shay Olson decided to show up and play a phenomenal game, right? And so I think these two players, we've talked about it, and you see it at state tournaments where a player will take over. You see it in college basketball, right? You always think back to the run that UConn had a couple years ago with Kemba Walker, right? A player will step up and win somebody a championship in some regards. It happens where it may be a team that you don't expect, but they show up. And that's a team that I think Greenleaf potentially has that ability, right? That they have two players that could step up and cause an issue. I'm not saying they're going to win the state championship, but they will cause an issue, I think, for teams going forward. That they won't be an easy out for anybody, regardless of whether it's just in conference or if it's at a state tournament.
It's really impressive. And of course, they got to get there because that district, two teams to state. We like Rimrock a lot, although Rimrock didn't make it last year. They got upset. But it really is, to me, that second spot. There's a couple of teams that are angling for it, and Greenleaf Friends has just as good of a shot as anybody to get it. So
yeah, sorry, did I say Rimrock got it last year? I meant Notice is the one that showed up last year, but Rimrock had a great season, just kind of got upset there as they went. But kudos to them. On the boys' side, Council played an interesting game this week, right? They went and played McCall.
Yeah.
And it's not, we see this occasionally, right? We see it with Lapway at the 1A D1 level, where they've played 5A teams and beat them. And that's a different beast. That's Lapway being they are one of the best teams in the state, period. Doesn't matter classification. But the Council boys go and lose. I mean, they lost by, I think, 14 or 15 points to McCall Donnelly. But that's it. I guess there's no win and a loss, right? But I think you can take some positives away from it and say, hey, you know what? We played a tough 3A team that is consistently in the state tournament, consistently makes runs at the state tournament and has done so for the last couple of years. And we hung with them. And so I think that's a good take home for Council, right? And I think that's a good sign for the district as well, because if you look down at Garden Valley, right? Garden Valley has that loss to Council. That was a close loss against Council for Garden Valley. But, they've got Garden Valley right now has got 4 straight wins to their record, all of them by at least 19 points. And they beat Cascade, who a lot of people have as the leader, right? In the conference coming in, that people thought Cascade was going to be the top dog, or, Cascade or Council somewhere in there. Or Council, excuse me. A lot of people thought Cascade might be that second to Council, right? But Garden Valley, I think, has overtaken that spot clearly and has cemented themselves as that second spot. And potentially, again, they're going to play in a couple weeks, and you never know, Garden Valley might be able to take them down.
Okay, see, this is why the show works, because we have dissenting opinions sometimes on things. I agree with you that it's those 3 teams: Council, Cascade, Garden Valley. Cascade was picked as the preseason pick in our preseason coaches poll, and even though Garden Valley's got the win over Cascade, Cascade did play Council really tough earlier in the season. Council only won by 45-41.
Sure.
So I just think these 3 teams are all still incredibly even, and it really could boil down to really, just who has the best night shooting. For Council, especially, Logan, will have a lot to talk about in 2 weeks, because their defining stretch of the year is coming up next Thursday and Saturday, the 19th and the 21st, a pair of home games. Cascade on Thursday, the 19th, Garden Valley at home on Saturday the 21st. So Council, if they can hold serve on their home floor and win those 2 games, they probably win the regular season conference title.
Sure, yeah, and I would agree with that. I think right now Council has kind of showed that they are the top dog because they have beaten Garden Valley and they have beaten Cascade. And like you said, yeah, that was a close game. But I'm just impressed with Council or Garden Valley and how they won that game on Saturday by 19 points on the road, no less.
That's true.
Just a little impressive. But you look at what Cascade did. Again, they played Kansas County, who might be one of the better D2 schools, and they played them tough. Didn't win that game, but showed up and with a good effort. So. Yeah, and you know what? This conference it seems like there are 3 teams that are typically pretty good, but they only get those 2 bids, and sometimes it's a tough pill to swallow. Or do they get 2.5? I don't know what the split is this year, but it's the 2-3 game, right, that determines who gets the auto bid or whatever it is. Those 2 teams are always so even, and I always feel bad in this conference. To see who loses that game because they could have easily been in. And I mean, what was it, 3 years ago, Cascade got that second bid and made a run to the state championship game. Ended up losing to Lakeside, but nobody had them beating Cary in the first round, and they did it. And nobody had them beating North Gym in the second round, and they did it. And so, anything can happen with the 2 seed coming out of this conference.
Yes, as a reminder, I'll kind of tell what every District 3 gets for each classification. So at 1A D2, they get 2 bids to state.
Just the 2.
2. There's no play-in games at all for 1A D2. So it's 2 and that's it. So you're right. That 2-3 matchup. Oh man, that consolation game is
even the 1. Like if you lose that, like it's not Council has won both games, but it's not like they've run them out of the building, So
it's going to be pretty fun to watch.
Yeah.
1A D1, and this is for girls and boys, obviously. For 1A D1, they get 2.5. So there is a chance we talked about with the Greenleaf girls. If they finish 3rd, they could still play their way in. They would have to play the second place team they would have to play the champion of District 5-6. That is going to be Grace on the girls' side, probably Grace on the boys' side. That's a tall order.
Yeah.
I would rather get one of those 2 bids because Grace is very good in both boys and basketball. 2A gets 2.5 bids. The 3rd place team would have to play the champion, the 2nd place team from District 1-2 up north. That's a winnable game on both the boys and girls side, I think.
That makes me feel good about the boys side for sure. Because we've seen New Plymouth come on really strong and Nampa Christian on the boys side, outside of, the Coal Valley and the Melba, right? And you know what? I think playing in this league, you could see 3 for both boys and girls there.
Yeah, Nampa Christian very quietly 10-2. Matt Gregory, first year head coach, he'd been the JV coach prior, has done a fantastic job with those guys, Landon Mills and company, and all the great Nampa Christian players there. 3A gets 2.5 bids. 3rd place will play the 2nd place team from 5-6. That's going to be a tough play-in game. You're looking at like Teton, Sugar Salem, Marsh Valley, Snake River, somebody. That's going to be that'll be a tough game on the boys' side. On the girls' side, maybe a little easier, but I don't know. Still, it's kind of a coin flip to me. 4A gets 2, and that's it. No play-in games at all for 4A. And then 5A gets could be as many as 6, could be as few as 4. 5th and 6th will play the 2nd place team from the north and the east. And
so there's 2 play-in games. So 6 teams could make it from District 5.
Could. Now, when you look at girls basketball for 5A, I just don't see that happening. North Idaho has Lake City, Coeur d'Alene, Post Falls, all 3 really incredible teams. In the East, you have Thunder Ridge, which is still undefeated, and Rigby, who's also very strong. So I don't know. It's going to be tough for the Treasure Valley in 5A girls, and even in 5A boys. Rigby and Madison from the East are both really good.
Yeah.
And then up north, you've got
Lake City is phenomenal. Yeah.
Right. And Coeur d'Alene.
Yeah.
Coeur d'Alene beat up on Eagle and Meridian when they came up and played in boys basketball.
Right.
Well, so I don't know. You want to get one of those 4 auto bids from
sure.
So,
and like this is where I was going to jump next.
Yeah.
I was talking about. We'll start with the girls. But Boise, and this is what we talked about last week, and I did 2 5A SIC girls games this week. Was there for Middleton and Mountain View, and then Middleton and Bora. And Boise and Timberline, they should get the 1 and the 2. I think that's pretty clear. This week we talked a lot about Hawaii's girls last week, right? And how they had kind of come on strong and won a couple games, and all of a sudden Rocky Mountain. And it's really funny because I did that game with Paul, and I kept talking about the Hawaii girls, and he's like, "You're not talking about Rocky Mountain girls," so I need to apologize to them for not, because they come out and they beat Hawaii, so they shut me up, and they win that game. So right, you get 4 bids to state automatically, 6 overall. I mean, I think Boise and Timberline are, like I said, in that mix, and I think there is a group of 5 schools that are going to fight for those final, I guess technically 4 spots, right? Because 2 are going to get in, and then 2 are going to go to a play-in game. Correct? That's how it's going to work. I think you're going to see, obviously, Hawaii, Rocky Mountain, and Eagle. And then I also think CUNA and Middleton are going to be mixed up in there, and Mountain View as well. So that really, I guess there's 6 teams fighting for 4. I meant to say 6. But at that Middleton Mountain View, right? That game, Middleton had 17 points in the first quarter, finished with 39 going into overtime. So they only scored 22 the rest of the way, and that was something. It was a little disappointing to see if you're a Middleton fan, right? Where you started off very strong, and then Mountain View defense just stepped up and shut them down. And that Middleton, they're so young. And Mountain View, for that regard, is young too, but they don't have a player, I think, yet, like a Demi Thompson, who came in and completely took over that game in the fourth quarter and overtime for Mountain View. And she ran away with it. She made her free throws. Middleton, I think they probably missed 8 free throws in overtime and the fourth quarter. Just make 1 free throw and you win the game, right? And they just could not do it. And so Mountain View, a team that obviously lost a lot from where they had been, but a team that still has won, 2 of the past 3 state championships at the girls level. And so I think Mountain View, a team that can be mixed in there. I just think that group is going to beat up on each other, and eventually we'll see some separation. But I think you could see. And then last night, Middleton beat Bora by 30 points. I think it's something like that.
Yeah.
And there was a running clock in the fourth quarter. Like it could have been, they kind of backed off. It could have been their defense was tough. They were stealing the ball with the press, and they looked good. So 2 different versions of Middleton happened to see this week. So I think that, those 6 teams are really going to be fighting for those final 4 spots.
Yeah. Yep. That's a very astute and great summary of what's happening at the 5A level. I did want to note boys 5A SIC last night. Eagle got a very tough win over Centennial in overtime, 61-62. And so we thought coming in, Hawaii, Eagle, kind of the top 2. Then there's another tier. I don't know. That top 5, 6 is all kind of blended to me, with Mountain View beating Hawaii and Eagle barely beating Centennial, right?
So, Mountain View, right, beat Hawaii. And I was talking to Micah Cranny on Saturday. He's the great PA voice of Idaho, the GOAT, as I say. But he was telling me, he does Mountain View's PA, and he usually does it there at the Fort Idaho Center for championship weekend. So if you've been to a championship game, you've probably heard Micah on the PA. But he was just telling me how Mountain View has kind of grown as the season's gone along. That they have, they had some bumps in the roads early, but things are clicking. They've got a freshman out there playing point guard that was controlling, led to, he dished that final assist for the win in that game against Hawaii, and that Mountain View has come on very strong over the last couple of weeks. really kind of found their footing, found their ground. And so maybe are they the one? I mean, they beat Hawaii, right? And that was the gold standard, so to say, is what people had been measuring up to. And man, maybe Mountain View. And like you mentioned with Eagle going with some tough games, maybe it's not as clear cut. Maybe it's a little more murky at the top of the 5A SIC than we originally thought.
Yeah, definitely could be. So that's a good look at what's going on in 5A hoops. And then 4A hoops, you're like, let's give some 4A love. Well, Logan, let's give some love to your school of the week.
Yeah.
This is a feature where you single out an overall school that had a good week across the board. And who we got this week?
Yeah, so Bishop Kelly. We're going to go with Bishop Kelly as our school of the week. They had exactly 0 losses on the week for both the boys and the girls side. So a great week of basketball if you're a Bishop Kelly fan. Let's start with the boys, right? So the boys played a couple of games this week, including some games against some. I mean, you look at Bishop Kelly's record; they're only 4-7 overall, and so I think people might scoff at that and say, "Yeah, they're not that great." But you got to look at who they played. I mean, they played Eagle, Preston, Pocatello, Centennial, Post Falls, Coeur d'Alene, Lake City. Does anybody have a more brutal in-state schedule than that? I don't know. So anyways, but returning back home, getting into conference play, they knocked off Valley View, they knocked off Emmett, and then on the road at CUNA, a 5A school, able to come away with a win there. So congrats, to the boys squad. And that was a close game that was right here on IdahoSports.com. But a close game there. And then the girls also won their opening, their conference game, I guess I should say. And really, the girls have also looked pretty good, I think, throughout the year as well. They're set at 12-3 overall. But the girls 6-0 in conference. They had a win last week over Columbia and then over Ridgeview as well. And, the Columbia game was close. Columbia, I think a lot of people like them as that second spot. And obviously so they're 6-1 in conference. So they've been rolling through. But then a big win for Bishop Kelly over Ridgeview. So I think they got past their one hurdle in conference, which was winning at Columbia. They'll match up with Columbia at home on January 27th. But Bishop Kelly, team of the week, boys and girls, undefeated on the week. So congrats to them.
Yeah, and for the Bishop Kelly boys, I had a chance to cover them earlier this year when they played at Post Falls. This is a team that had to start over. I mean, they lost. All of their guys, not all their guys. They brought back some role players, but they pretty much had to start from scratch. Rakeem Johnson has done phenomenally well. As long as he can stay out of foul trouble, Rakeem Johnson is a great post player for BK. Really good offensive tackle for that football team as well.
Yeah, I was going to say he had some great blocks in that game against Minico specifically that I did. And we called his name. You don't call an offensive lineman specifically very often unless they are playing lights out. His name was called many times in that football game.
Yes. And then on the other side of that, it was a lot of those football players that play basketball, maybe more so than in years past at Bishop Kelly. So it took them a little time since they got all the way to the championship in football to get their legs under them. And then the other big storyline with Bishop Kelly is Jack Dennis, the all-state linebacker, was going to be a starter for Bishop Kelly this year, was really looking at embracing that leadership role. He's already been a leader on the football field, but taking it to the basketball court as well. He ends up having to have season-ending surgery to get ready for college football because he's going to play at the next level. And so, made that tough decision to, hey, I got to get this taken care of. So he's out for the season now for Bishop Kelly. So that's the guy you were kind of counting on to be your captain and your team leader.
Yeah.
And so they're also trying to find then, who takes on that leadership role. Rakeem Johnson, certainly. I think Joseph Barrand is a guy that really has been coming on the last couple of games for BK as well. So I don't know. They're continuing to be a work in progress, and talking to their coaches, they said, of course, the wins and losses are nice, but we want to create experiences for these kids so they can go back and talk about, 10, 20 years down the road. Hey, we played Pocatello. I guarded Julian Bowie, who played at Boise State. We went up and we played Lake City. We played the best. We played a kid that's going to Virginia.
Yeah.
So they're really embracing the experience this year.
Right. Yeah, and you know what? Like they took care of business against Valley View and Emmett. Like those weren't very close games, and I think maybe that the trial and tribulations for them, so to say, in the early season, you hope that pays dividends come conference time. And right now, I mean, they've got a couple of winnable games in front of them. Valley View is kind of the pesky one that always seems to play around with flirting with, being at the top and all that. And they took care of business there. And you know what? Like, outside of Ridgeview and Skyview, I gotta like Bishop's Kelly chances in conference.
Yeah, that'll be fascinating to see how that all unfolds as the season goes along. All right, well, that'll do it for this edition of the Treasure Valley Prepcast. You might be asking, hey, Raleigh Lane happened. Hello, biggest wrestling meet of the year. We will talk about that and more on our standalone wrestling podcast, the Idaho Mat Chat Prepcast. You can catch that live. We're going to be doing it Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Mountain Time on the IdahoSports.com YouTube channel, Facebook page, and Twitter account. You can also subscribe to the Mat Chat Prepcast and get it audio only that way. So that's where you're going to get all your Raleigh Lane breakdown, is on the Idaho Mat Chat Prepcast. But Logan, as always, great talking hoops with you.
Yeah, it's always a fun time of year. I can't believe it that we're only like 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks, 4 weeks from teams punching tickets that there will be, district championships played in a month. So it's right around the corner.
Pretty wild. Pretty wild. All right. Well, thanks for tuning in, everybody, to the Treasure Valley Prepcast. For Logan Green, I'm Brandon Baney. We'll see you next time on IdahoSports.com.